Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the Institute of Politics Speaker Series event, POTUS Power Plays, Hear from the Fired. My name is Will Foley, and I'm a first-year student in the college from New York, intending to major in law, letters, and society, and cognitive science. At the IOP, I've been a member of the event ambassador team for 3 quarters, and a junior writer in the interview section of the IOP's political review, The Gate. If you're anything like me, you probably spent the last few weeks and months reading news headlines with a mix of shock and awe, stunned at how quickly a president could reshape key federal agencies and oversight roles. This afternoon, we'll hear from some of those former leaders of federal agencies, recently dismissed by President Trump. Rohit Chopra is the former director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, where he strengthened protections against predatory lending, particularly for student loans, and aggressively pursued enforcement actions against corporations engaging in deceptive financial practices. Jennifer Abruzzo is the former general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board. In her role, she made headlines by expanding protections for workers' rights and the rights of college students, as well as pushing for the ability of immigrants to organize regardless of their immigration status. Michael Missal is the former Inspector General for the Department of Veterans Affairs. In his role, he spearheaded numerous high-profile investigations addressing serious concerns about veteran care, financial misconduct, and administrative inefficiencies within one of the nation's largest federal departments. Moderating tonight's conversation is Shalanda Young, former director of the Office of Management and Budget and current IOP Pritzker Fellow. Some quick housekeeping notes before we begin. First, please silence your cell phones. Second, when it is time for Q&A, a microphone will be placed in the audience. Please line up in the aisles, and remember that priority for the first questions will go to students. Finally, please make sure to check out upcoming IOP events, including the Congressional Legacy of Shirley Chisholm, featuring Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley and former Senator LaFonza Butler, which will take place this Friday at 12:30 at the International House. And secondly, is it still the economy, stupid? 4 decades of democratic strategizing, featuring James Carville, Liz Smith, and David Axelrod, which will take place on Thursday, April 3rd at 5:30 right here in Ida Noyes. You can register for both events and more on the IOP website. Now please join me in welcoming to the stage Rohit Chopra, Jennifer Abruzzo, Michael Missal, and Shalanda Young. Thank you.
I did ask if it was going to be Beyonce, but you know, I'll take Michael. By the way, he and I share a birthday, so they did not know that at IOP, but thank you for my birthday twin as walkout music. As I think I was introduced, Shalanda Young, former director of the Office of Management and Budget, but today I'm just here to moderate 3 former colleagues, really. Our agencies had interactions, and you all have different stories than me. I like to tell people I was fired, but I was really fired by an election. There was an expectation that I would leave on January 20th. And even though my family would go, well, don't they want to keep you? I'm like, well, it doesn't really work that way. And I'm not quite sure I'd want to stay. But you all were in different situations. Congress, in its wisdom, thought there were some agencies and some jobs that should have some independence from this political process of electing a new president. And I would love to hear from each one of you because the stories get a little mixed up. You'd hear from President Trump, oh, I fired so-and-so would then tweet, you didn't fire me, I resigned. And I think it's helpful to hear from each one of you how you got into the job, how you went into the job, what was the expectation of the job if it was a term, and how you found that you would no longer have the job. And Mike, if you could start.
Sure. So as Will said, I was the Inspector General at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I was nominated by President Obama in October of 2015, had to go through Senate confirmation, and because it's anything VA gets a lot of attention up on Capitol Hill. It took me 7 months to get through the Senate, although there was no opposition. So I started on May 2nd, 2016. And under the statute, inspectors generals are governed by the Inspector General Act of 1978, which is a post-Watergate reform. IGs are, by definition, independent and nonpartisan. So the expectation is that they serve across administrations. When President Reagan, the first president elected after the IG Act was passed, he fired a number of IGs at the time when he was reminded that these are nonpartisan and they shouldn't be fired across administrations. Then he hired them back. So since that time, there have been a few IGs fired, but it's typically for serious reasons, not because it's a change of administration. So I served in the end of the Obama administration, throughout the first Trump administration, and throughout the Biden administration. We were conscious of what's in the news, and we saw that during the campaign there'd been some notices that if President Trump was reelected, he might bring in his own IGs, as he called them. And we thought, well, that's not what the statute says. You don't have your own IGs. They're all supposed to be independent. So 4 days into the administration, Friday night, January 24th, 17 of us received a 2-sentence email from the head of presidential personnel that said, due to changing priorities, you're relieved and fired as the Inspector General of whatever agency. Thank you for your service. And so that's where we were given notice that we were fired. Under the law, the president has to give 30 days notice to Congress if the president wants to fire an IG. And it was amended in 2022 to say, and it has to also give detailed case-specific reasons. Neither was given in this situation, so a number of IGs have brought a lawsuit. We have a hearing this Thursday challenging the firing because we believe it's real important that the president needs to follow the law, and we'll see where the courts end up.
And I can co-sign what Michael is saying. OMB has a role in helping manage the IG system, and President Biden gave us a push to ensure that we brought the IGs back, respected inspector generals, respected the independence. And I got to say, there were a couple of IGs who had done some things we had some questions about. But we were so concerned with the view that we were politicizing the IGs that we reviewed them for years and never came to conclusion because we thought it was such a big step to get rid of an IG that anything that was a deficit in what they were doing did not outweigh, we thought, the complications and the issues with taking away the independence of inspector generals. So that's how the administration I worked with approached it, which is why this was quite shocking to a lot of us who watched this. Jennifer.
Yeah, so it's great to be here, and it's great to see so many folks, and I'm happy to chat with people afterwards as well. So I was with the National Labor Relations Board for almost 30 years. I exited during the first Trump administration, and then, because I was Deputy General Counsel, which was a political position, and so I left at that time, and then was nominated by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate in July of 2021. Vice President Harris had to break the tie twice. I did have a little bit of, it was all along partisan lines, but I did get in. It was important, and up until January 27th, 2025 is when I received a communication from the White House. But before I get there, I just want to kind of give you some context about why I joined the agency in the first place. And the agency is a really important agency. It is the only federal agency in the country that enforces the only federal labor law in the country. And it was enacted in 1935 during the Great Depression because the lack of communication between workers and their employers was creating such instability, wildcat strikes and the like, and it was affecting the failing economy. And so the notion was like, let's create this statute that's going to level the playing field somewhat between workers and their employers and give workers the rights to collectively bargain with their employers through representatives of their free choosing, or to otherwise engage with one another collectively without a union involved in order to improve their wages and working conditions. So it is a pro-worker statute. It always has been. There's been some amendments over the course of time. But that is, the context for why it was created, how important it is, and how important that the agency is. And, all those that work there feel the vast majority, I've been there was there for many decades, they are committed to that mission of protecting workers' rights and ensuring that workers have a voice and ensuring that workers feel empowered to exercise their rights without fear of retaliation. And so fast forward to, I was confirmed for a 4-year term. Under the general counsel is the chief prosecutor. The agency is bifurcated, so the board members are the adjudicators. They are the decision makers. Ultimately, they issue the case precedent, but I'm the one that brings the cases to them to consider or reconsider. And so under our statute, the general counsel, while there's a 4-year term, Congress did not put in any sort of removal protections for the general counsel. Unlike the board members, where Congress actually inserted in some removal protections for the board members, just cause protections, in other words. And so on January 27th, I get an email along with one of the board members, Gwen Wilcox, the first African-American woman to ever be board member, and she had been chair just previous to Trump getting in. We both got this email late at night from the White House, and similarly, in essence, it said something along the lines of, I have no confidence that you will effectuate my policies, which is probably one of the only truths I've heard out of Trump's mouth. But at any rate...
Did they thank you for your service?
So I don't recall if I got it. I frankly, it was such a messy letter. I was accused of... I did many things, which I'm very proud of, that I know that this administration is not fond of because they, elevate corporate interests over workers' rights. But they accused me of things like rulemaking in the joint employer sphere, and that's the one thing I didn't do. So it was a very sloppy letter or email. But at any rate, I got my marching papers, as did board member Wilcox, and while I had no removal protection, she did. And so it was really important that she, and she knew it too. Obviously, we spoke quite a bit. And so she sued. And she won in the district court because, there was no, they didn't follow the statutory, just the process, never mind substantively, just on process, procedurally. So she won in district court, and then there was an oral argument. Then it immediately got appealed to the DC Circuit, and there was oral argument, and we're just waiting for the panel to decide that matter. And I'm sure we'll talk about many other things.
I think it's worth going into, after we hear from Rohit, a little more about why Michael's in litigation and you two are not, and it goes to exactly that, how Congress wrote the law, and then also want to expound, even if the court side and they go back in, what are the expectations when and if that happens? So Rohit, if you could give us a little of your story.
Sure, well, thanks for having me, and thanks to all of you for being here. I really think the question that each of you should be thinking about is, who should the president and the top political leadership get to remove from public service? Should they get to remove a TSA agent that didn't vote for them? Should they get to remove a park ranger that posted the wrong thing online? Who should they really get to kick out of the government? And so I served as the director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I was nominated by President Biden to that. I actually previously was a federal trade commissioner and was nominated by President Trump to that. And one of the things that I think we always need to be thinking about is that there are some agencies, and certainly Jennifer's is one of them, where there is so many organized interests who frankly want to burn the place down. During my tenure at the CFPB, we collected forfeitures, I think of close to $10 billion. Apple, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, some of the biggest banks and financial companies on the planet. And one of the reasons why some of the laws create 5-year terms or terms that are fixed, that are supposed to carry on from one president to another, is to create some sense that we are not going to completely politicize law enforcement. And actually what you see, and I think this is happening at the National Labor Relations Board, they are defunding the police that oversee Wall Street, big tech, and frankly, some of the biggest employers in America. And that really makes me worry that we're going to have a system where law enforcement becomes part of the political campaign process. A few weeks after I was, actually within a few days of after I was removed, the new CFPB leadership, first it was acting Secretary Scott Bessent. He became CFPB director. Now it's Shalanda's successor, Russ Vogt. He is now acting CFPB director. They issued a series of pardons to Capital One, to JP Morgan Chase. In other words, lawsuits that were ongoing that they just pulled out. And by the way, it wasn't all of them, it was just some of them. And they even removed some that were in litigation filed by Trump's first CFPB director. So now people are wondering, is there some sort of secret process whereby you can go and get one of these corporate pardons and be done? And I think that's really the question, is where should the line be? I completely acknowledge, and I shared, the president can remove me. In fact, there's a Supreme Court case about whether the CFPB director is removable. I acknowledge that, but I think there should be some explanation as to why. It's not that they've filled it with anyone. They've actually put everybody on leave and told them stop all investigations, stop all inspections. In other words, they're trying to repeal the law without Congress. And I think we're going to see how we pay the price for that. Now, I actually was not fired on day one. It was about 2 weeks. And in fact, President Trump gave a speech at Davos. And his speech at Davos, he called out Jamie Dimon and Brian Moynihan, the CEOs of JP Morgan Chase and Bank of America. And the Wall Street lobby was losing its mind. They were saying, you haven't fired Rohit, you haven't really done what we want. But over time, we have seen that once Elon Musk and others invaded some of these agencies, by February 1st, my birthday weekend, I was out, speaking of birthdays.
Well, happy belated.
Thank you.
I love Aquarius. Let me tell you, my building was across the street from Rohit's building. My kid went to daycare in CFPB, so I can tell you they're doing everything. They're keeping employees home. They also took the signs off the buildings. The parents have to pull over and throw their kids into daycare and hope daycare is around tomorrow. So other than shutting it down because they can't, they're doing everything to do that. And I will say it was the talk of the town when Rohit was still not fired. And it was mostly banking lobbyists who were like, what is happening here? We thought he'd be out of here. He's coming for us. So it's very interesting how that played out. And you had some agreements with President Trump, or he agreed with some of what you did when you were Federal Trade Commissioner. So it was interesting to watch that. But that takes me to a question like, I'm struggling with this. We talk about independent agencies. When I was at OMB, nothing about us was independent. The White House could call, they could yell, they could direct, they could argue with. I had to work with agencies. But there are some agencies who've carried this title of independent. And a lot of it had to do with the protections given its leadership from being fired or having terms that were different than political seasons. But does that really exist? Were we lying to ourselves? Are there really independent agencies? I mean, the FBI, we've seen, probably one of the last agencies I would think would have political leadership or be fired before the end of their term. We're seeing this stuff and it's almost normal. Are there really independent agencies, or are we fooling ourselves?
Well, the big question, I think, is what will happen with the Federal Reserve Board? The Federal Reserve is governed by 7 governors. They are confirmed by the Senate. And the whole purpose of that was to make sure that the president, in the lead up to a campaign, cannot direct people to change the money supply and goose the economy just in front of an election season. So I would argue that right now there are none. There is, and I consider independence about not interfering in law enforcement investigations, not directing agency heads to go after specific companies or to pardon others, and to respect some degree that there is public interest and evidence and facts that should proceed forward. And yeah, I would essentially argue that right now that is over, and for the Federal Reserve Board, it's a jump ball.
Yeah.
So I'm going to disagree a little bit. I think for
That's why we're here.
I think for the NLRB, at least on the board side, there's a quorum right now, so the board members can function. And currently, and of course, there's ongoing litigation as to whether there's 3 board members right now, 1 Republican, 2 Dems. I talked about Gwen Wilcox being the one who had to file suit and win in order to get her job back. There is a quorum, and they are functioning. And as I understand it, there is no interference with the White House as to their decision making. On the flip side, with regard to the general counsel side, as I understand it, similarly, there's an acting who was a regional director is a regional director in our LA office who's now acting as my successor. He was kind of like wandering my halls waiting to get appointed, and it took a week from the 20th to the 27th. But I have not heard any reports that the White House is specifically interfering with what he is doing. So I'm not sure at this moment. Now, I will say, the argument is, because I've been to the oral arguments, DOJ is arguing that the president has absolute power to fire anybody in the executive branch, regardless of whether there's removal protections that were given by Congress, regardless of what functions they have, meaning for the board members, they've got quasi-judicial functions. They don't have executive functions. But Trump is saying, no, I'm entitled under Article 2. I can fire anybody that I want because they work for the executive branch, which then creates the whole issue of what you're talking about. Then there's no independence if they win. Because what that means is I'm going to either put in people that are going to be sycophants, or the people that are there better go along with what my policies are, because if they don't, I will remove them. So therein lies the rub. Now, right, and for whatever whim, if he gets upset with whomever, which he's done plenty of times, people will go. And so for decision makers that do quasi-judicial functions like the board members, the concern is that they'll start thinking twice about not necessarily being neutral arbiters, but actually thinking, is this decision going to get me fired? And think more about holding on to their jobs as opposed to doing their jobs. Now, fortunately for right now, the courts have stepped in and said, hey, there's something called a constitution, there's something called separation of powers, there's 3 co-equal branches of government. We rejected monarchy rule 250 years ago. We don't have an autocracy yet. And so this is where we are. But if they are successful, then I completely agree with Rohit. I think at this moment, at least for the NLRB, there is still independence. And I will say, when I was GC, both when I was deputy GC back during the Obama years and as GC during the Biden years, there was complete independence. The White House never reached out to me to say, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, or consider X, Y, and Z, or you're not, adhering to my policy. There was complete and utter independence. But, the argument is that he should have absolute power, and if he does, then that's the end of the independence of independent agencies.
And certainly for inspectors general, independence is just a key element of the inspector general process, and that we've had for almost 50 years now. So under the statute, it says IGs are independent. What that means is when I was the IG, I didn't report to anybody. I know it sounds a little strange, but the president couldn't tell me what to do. The VA secretary couldn't tell me what to do. Congress couldn't tell me what to do. Obviously, Congress controlled my funding, and the president could fire me if they wanted. But we had a big office. There's still an office of Inspector General now that doesn't take direction from anybody. So it is independent in that way. And a lot of people don't understand what an Inspector General's office do. Let me quickly go through what it is, because it really makes our government so much better. So we have law enforcement authority. So I had about 250 Series 1811 law enforcement officers who carried guns, could arrest people. Let me give you sort of an example of the fraud that we would fight. So a few years back, there was a plane crash in Germany where the pilot had serious mental health issues and flew the plane into the mountain, got a lot of attention. So I started thinking, I wonder if there are commercial airline pilots who are veterans who are also getting disability compensation for PTSD or other mental illness that the FAA says you can't fly a plane. So we got a list from the FAA. This is why when you talk about fraud, it's sometimes really hard to find. It's not sitting there in the front door waiting for you. We got a list from the FAA. Give us a list of all the commercial airline pilots. Then we matched it with a list of veterans getting disability compensation, which would otherwise disqualify them from having an FAA license. Mental health issues, cardiac issues, a number of other issues. Put them together, 5,000 names came up. So what's going on here? People are either flying planes when they shouldn't be flying or lying to VA about getting the benefits when they shouldn't be getting the benefits. So we started digging into it a little more. You look at somebody's health records, and they said, I got claustrophobia. I can't be in a small enclosed space flying a commercial plane. Others were saying, severe schizophrenia, I can't control it. Do you want that person to be on a plane? We brought a number of criminal cases there, turned the list over to the FAA, and they've worked through it. So that's one thing they do, is fight fraud across VA. Probably had about 1,000 active criminal cases at any one time. It's something, there's 46, 47 different kinds of fraud we would look at. So fraud, waste, and abuse is one thing. The second is making the government more efficient and effective. So we could look at any of the VA programs. We decided what we were going to look at, how we were going to look at it, and we put out a report. We were very transparent. The public could see everything other than the criminal cases, which obviously you want to protect the integrity of the investigation. But everything else, we disclosed to the public what we were doing. And we had a number of different cases where we looked at things and said they could be doing things better. VA is the largest integrated healthcare system in the United States. About 9 million veterans get care at VA. They have 171 hospitals, including a few here in Chicago, as well as about 1,200 other places, clinics where they can get health care. They're converting their electronic healthcare system. VA was one of the pioneers of electronic healthcare system, but that was 50 years ago. It's time to upgrade it. I knew how tough it was going to be. It's a huge contract. It was going to be at least a $16 billion contract. We started looking at it right away. We've put out 23 reports about all the issues. It's delayed it, but for good reasons. Veterans were dying from it. For instance, their medications weren't coming through. Their appointments weren't coming through. So that was one where I thought we were helping VA improve what they were doing.
So Mike, can you expound on that? A lot of people here, we talk about DOGE, all this fraud, all this waste, all this abuse. No one's paid attention to this in the years there's been a U.S. government. That's what you do. That is what IGs do.
That's what didn't make sense. In fact, when we heard DOGE was being created to fight fraud, waste, and abuse, we thought, great, we'll have somebody we can work with. In fact, we reached out to DOGE. They never returned our calls. And what I've seen DOGE do, I'm not there anymore, but I get some information, is essentially what they're doing is just cutting staff and cutting contracts. So I know what they did at VA. They were going to first cut 800 contracts. Now it's reduced to 500. There's no way they've really sort of analyzed those contracts to understand what they're doing. And I really am concerned about how veterans are going to get harmed in the service for what they're doing. So what DOGE is just very different. They're not looking, and the other thing they talk about is all the fraud they're finding. So when you hear Elon Musk and others talk about the fraud, they're saying, USAID was a criminal enterprise. So if they are committing fraud or finding fraud, there should be criminal cases. Either they're letting the fraudsters off or it's not really fraud. So as I said, every year we would bring hundreds of criminal cases. We'd publish them. You'd see what they are. So if they really are finding fraud, we should be seeing the cases.
Yeah.
But I find it ironic, and this when you guys were all let go, it was like, well, if you're trying to find fraud, waste, and abuse, if that's, really what you're doing as opposed to what we know what they're doing, but that's what they say they're doing. It's ironic that they would get rid of all of the IGs that actually have that job.
Right.
And saved, and what, $100 billion or something, he wants to get to Musk, who this unelected person, corporate billionaire, who wants to get to 1 trillion or 2 trillion, whatever he wants to get to, and yet you guys did 100 billion or something, and somehow you're all fired.
With the goal of improving service. That's the piece that isn't there when it's cut, redirect to someone else's contract that might enrich my friends or me. Your job, all of our jobs, if you worked in government before now, was make it more efficient, make it better. Government ain't perfect. I'm the first one to say that, but the last clause, to make it better and to serve people better, is what's missing from this document.
And I will say, just to add to this, during my tenure, I eliminated a lot of contracts and a lot of executive positions. Did I chest thump about it? No, because I think you want to go through a responsible way of saying, this is not useful anymore. Let us sunset it, or these positions, these individuals either should be reassigned or we should let them go. But I think the goal was making government work. One of the things they did as part of the first efficiency initiatives at the CFPB is they let go all of the new technologists who were policing the big tech companies and the fintechs and others, which to me, that wasn't about efficiency, that was about breaking government. And I think we should be really open about what this is. In fact, when I look hard at their other major efficiency initiative, you might have heard fork in the road. We're going to buy out, we're going to pay people until September, and they're just going to stop working. It's a buyout. And the really interesting thing is I looked at the numbers of who took it, it looked like everybody who was already planning to retire or get a different job took it. So basically, they just threw away potentially billions of dollars in the name of efficiency, and their goal for that was supposed to get rid of a lot more people, but I think they just gave out a lot of money that they could have actually saved. So they're also putting large swaths of people on administrative leave, so they're paying them without working. It's one thing if you say, you know, I want to take a pause before we keep doing this initiative. Why don't all of you work on, for example, at the CFPB, we get every day thousands of consumer cases and consumer complaints. Why don't you work on them? No, they're actually at home under an order to perform no work task. So I think the answer is there should be a sharper effort to make government work better, and we should communicate clearly the things that are being eliminated, the things that are being changed. But the public also has to demand that it's not for the purpose of breaking it.
Right, and just to add on to that, and I'll speak about NLRB, but it goes across all agencies. Reducing the workforce makes the agencies less efficient, not more efficient. You have less people able to serve the public in any meaningful way. And frankly, I think that that is the goal, or at least one of the goals, to show your government, you know, you don't need the government. You don't, you know, they're not going to help you. They can't help you. And you're just, and it's creating chaos right now. I mean, it's creating inefficiencies. The fact that people are afraid they're going to lose their jobs and are concerned about whether they're going to maintain their jobs or not is detracting from the focus on the mission of protecting, in the NLRB's case, workers' rights. So DOGE, even without reduction in force, has created inefficiencies just by the whole instability and insecurity of, you know, these government workers who thought they had job security that now have none. And then, you know, just reducing more and more of the workforce, whether it's Department of Labor, National Labor Relations Board, CFPB is gone, you know, everybody's, as Rohit said. And there's many other agencies out there where if they get their way and reduce the force down to the nubs, the protecting workers' rights will happen, but it will not really be as robust for sure as it needs to be, because the people that will remain will still be committed, the career people. But you know, they'll be forced to do quite a lot more with less, and it means that we won't be able to tackle the Amazons and the Starbucks and the corporate entities that really flout federal SpaceX, Tesla. You know, we've got cases against those two companies.
Yeah.
Right?
So it is my belief that we've seen this before. We've not seen it at this level. I worked on the congressional side of funding for many years. If you want to kill an agency, starve it of money and resources. You don't grow it. So I've seen this on the congressional side. The National Labor Relations Board has had its detractors on the Republican side for many years. CFPB, which is why the creators of that agency said, Congress, you don't get to fund that agency the way you do NLRB, the way you do Veterans Affairs. They will go around the congressional appropriations process because they knew that was a way for those who did not like that agency to starve it. So I think we've seen this show before. We've not seen it at this level, and we've not seen laws broken to get it. But there are people, the way to break people's hope of government is to do this kind of thing. It's to, you know, have my mother go into a Social Security office and want to turn around because she sees, you know, 200 people in line. Or it's a way, if you ask young mothers to come sign up for a women's and children's feeding program, and you get there and they're out of money to starve a program. It's like, I gave government a shot, government failed me, I'm now disillusioned. So that's my opinion. I think we've seen this show before. We've not seen it to this scale, and it's not for efficiencies. It's to break it and people to lose trust in government, and that's a terrible thing for democracy. I want to switch gears a little. You're all human beings. I'm a human. We sometimes forget that. I feel really bad for federal workers. It's not just the work not being done. It's a family who was in the middle of, maybe buying a first home or having a child who all of a sudden is living with a lot of angst. But you all too. And I just wanted to ask, how has this been for you? I think we've seen at CFPB and NLRB, unfortunately, this has happened before under President Biden, under the first President Trump. That's why this has been litigated before, and we don't see litigation now. Yours is a new low, where we've seen IGs fired this way. How's it been personally, and do you fear, as you do events like this, as you speak out, as you litigate, any issues with personal safety? And I worry for people who choose to bring a lot of this out, and you didn't necessarily sign up for this.
Yeah, it's true. As the IG, I would get threats almost every day in my emails. Some of them were more serious than others because veterans are upset if they weren't getting their benefits, and they blame me. I'm the one who's trying to fix it, but they didn't always know the distinction. One of the scarier ones is when somebody emailed me a picture of my house and said, "I know where you live." So it happened almost all the time. But I didn't do this job because I thought I was going to be afraid. I did this job because I thought it was the right thing to do. I thought it was really important. Helping veterans, to me, there's no more sacred obligation that we had. So I sort of put personal safety aside, said, we're going to do what's necessary to do it. But I am, if you talk about emotions, I'm just really sad about where things are right now, because what we did at VA, doing independent oversight, what other OIGs did at their agencies, was really help the federal government. Not only, on a yearly basis, IGs saved the federal government about $100 billion, but they, more importantly, in my mind, they make the programs better. They make it work for people. As Jennifer brought out, that's what we're supposed to do. Government's supposed to help people, and every agency has its own purpose in what they're trying to serve. And what I'm seeing now by the firing of the IGs, they're trying to chill oversight. They're trying to chill any of the gatekeepers, and it's just not inspectors general. You look across the government, they're taking out the guardrails there that were hopefully independent, but trying to protect, to make sure things were done the right way. And just today, the president finally nominated somebody to take a position of one of the fired IGs. He nominated somebody to be the inspector general for HHS, one of the largest federal agencies. Again, we're supposed to be independent and nonpartisan. We're supposed to be experienced in what we do. The person nominated has been a Republican operative his whole career. He's had ethical issues. IGs are supposed to be, pure as the driven snow, as they say. And this is somebody who's anything but pure as the driven snow and doesn't have any experience. And if that's what's going to go into the positions, if we're not able to prevail in our suit, then it's sad to me that the government is going to lose a great resource that it had to make it better, and everybody's going to suffer.
Yeah, well, the Senate has a say in this. I don't see that pushback happening, but this is why we have a nominations and confirmations process to say that person is not qualified for the job and does not follow the letter of and the spirit of the IG law. Jennifer?
Yeah, I don't fear for myself. I'm from Queens, so I mean, for my safety. But I feel it's, I'm not employed at the moment, but I'm quite busy. And in large part, I'm busy kind of doing what I'm doing here today. And the reason why I think it's so important to do what we're doing here today is there's got to be civic engagement. We've got to maintain hope. And we can turn the ship around, but we've got to do it collectively. Collective action, I'm all about collective action. I mean, when you think back to, 250 years ago, it was ordinary citizens in Boston that were protesting a tax on tea that's, basically started the American Revolution. So we should not be, and, we've got power. We should not be giving up our power. We should not let corporate billionaires tell us how we should be governed and drown out our voices. We need to take charge. We need to say, we are going to amplify our voices and we're going to demand changes. And if that means getting out in the streets, if that means because our government's not functioning properly, if that means protesting about wages and working conditions or social, economic, and racial injustices, if it means holding our lawmakers accountable for not representing us, holding others accountable for not enforcing the laws, that's what we need to be doing. Because I think if we can act together and say, no, we get to decide how we're governed. It's not going to be corporate billionaires that's going to be the paternalistic, we know better, then that's how we kind of shift the divide and conquer, aspect of what they're trying to do. Everyone is demonized with this administration, and we need to kind of rally together and recognize that we have more in common than that which separates us, and we need to kind of wrap our arms around what are our common goals and demand the changes that are necessary if we're going to maintain our democracy. So that's really why I do what I'm doing right now, is to just remind people of the power we have, and we need to get out in the streets and we need to do it together.
So Queens is not scared.
Queens is not scared.
We heard it. Rohit?
So a lot of people asked me after the election, are you going to resign?
Yeah.
And actually a lot of people with fixed terms did resign. And I think the two of us felt that it was really important for the history books and really the public to know that we were removed. Mm-hmm. And I think that was important to me because I feel you should not, it was not that I was unwilling to serve, but I think it becomes really easy to surrender. It becomes easy to tune out. It becomes easy to really give up. And the truth is, Shalanda, I'm actually not a huge defender of government. For those of you who are undergraduates, maybe you're 19, 20 years old, 17, 18 years ago, we had just a horrific crisis in our country when the whole global financial system melted down. And actually not really far from where we were sitting in the neighborhoods nearby, there were enormous numbers of foreclosures, many of them illegal. People lost their homes. Their kids who were going to go to college had to borrow like crazy in student loans. And I thought that was the direct result of the watchdogs in government being lapdogs for the big Wall Street banks and the people they were supposed to oversee. And I do think I'm not someone who blindly defends our government. I think there's a lot that needs to be overhauled, that needs to be fixed, and that we need to demand more accountability and transparency from it. So I'm with Jennifer on this, which is that if we tune out every single day, it could get worse. But if you're happy about the current situation, if you're not happy, you have to speak, and you have to speak loudly. And I think that is the only way. And I'm actually very optimistic, Shalanda, because I think people all over the country are seeing what is happening, and they're ready. They can ready to take a stand. And now changes in government policy used to not really change much, it felt like. And now the stakes feel just so much higher for so many more people.
So, someone made the comment, this deep state that I can tell you I did not see, because I can promise you the career staff fought me as much as they fought anyone. They did their jobs. They pushed back, they asked questions. And frankly, if it was important enough to me, then I thought it was my job to win them over with facts and a discussion, not just to tell them what to do because I said so. That's, my mother used to say that, because I said so. So I chose not to take that tack. But I heard someone say, you know, that deep state, you know, President Trump was worried about, I think he's creating it because people have now, this just feels so much different than the first administration, or the first term. This is, people are under attack. And if you're in Washington, you can't turn a corner without running into someone who has lost a job or who's on leave and worried about losing a job. And I can tell you, there are not enough jobs to make up for it. So this is also an economics issue about our country. If any single employer let go of this many people, we'd be worried about the next jobs report. So this also doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint, what we're seeing. Before we move on to Q&A, I do have to ask Rohit, they're one of the big bankers in the country, may have called you an asshole, is that right?
I think it was a son of a bitch.
Son of a bitch, okay. Asshole's a favorite of mine, so I just replaced it. And also you hear the argument, you don't need CFPB. We have all these regulators, and I think that same CEO may have pulled out a whole sheet to show all these people they have to answer to. They don't need CFPB. Why the vitriol?
Well, you'd have to ask Jamie Dimon that, but I know it's an emotional time for him and others. I think this is obviously a huge challenge for how they are going to navigate this situation themselves. And is there a totally new playbook where maybe laws and rules are selectively enforced? But I can't speak to that. All I'll say is that it speaks to how big, powerful interests can really fixate on certain law enforcement agencies. And during my confirmation process, like Jennifer, I was subject to a tie break. But I asked many of the senators who voted for me the previous time, I said, what has changed? And they said, oh no, you're good, you're qualified. We're not allowed to vote for anyone in your, and I didn't follow up, but I think that really says a lot, which is who is not allowing you to really take a vote that you believe is the case. And to me, that raises also questions about independence of our elected officials and who is pulling the strings.
Thank you for that. Let's move on to questions. We have one here. I can't see you, but I think you're there.
I don't think any of us can.
And real quick, I didn't answer Shalanda's question about regulators and duplication. We tried that old way of not having a CFPB, and we had a massive subprime mortgage crisis. So I'd wait to not repeat that.
All right.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Seth Cohn. I am a 2Y in the booth and alumnus of the college. My question is, the American system is designed to be political. This will be short, I promise. The American system is designed to be political, representative government chosen through elections with checks and balances among the branches, not through a permanent class of unelected bureaucrats. Given this, why should Americans be concerned about the shrinking of the bureaucratic institutions? Doesn't a shift away from entrenched bureaucracy, especially in light of recent electoral outcomes, reflect a public desire for more direct political accountability? For reference, there are 3 million civilian government positions. Thank you.
Well, I think we touched on some of that on the panel as to why this moment feels particularly harmful. You had Republican members, Chuck Grassley comes to mind, who was the greatest defender of the independence of inspectors generals I think we've ever had in the United States Senate, who's still serving in Congress. It's Congress who set up protections for certain positions because they didn't want presidents coming in and politicizing law enforcement agencies. So the same elected process thought it was important to protect some of the processes that government does that are most central to how we operate as a civilization And we're seeing those things overturned. So the will of Congress is being overturned. A lot of this stuff is being litigated. Is it right to not follow the laws? Hey, Bill Clinton shrunk government. It took him 7 years to do it. So some of us have an issue with the process and the not following of laws and terms being set by an elected Congress that a president is ignoring. I think you heard from Rohit. For me, it was incredibly powerful. A lot of us have seen government, and government is, every different agency is different in who they serve. And I can tell you the need for improvement is vast, but my worry at least is in breaking it, we lose the trust of the American people, and I think it's no less consequential than democracy itself. So that's my worry. The way it's being done is a problem. The only way to fix government, in my opinion, is through both parties. Because we talk about electoral politics, what is the vote difference in the House right now? About 3 votes. 2 Democrats died. If the Democrats had won the majority, they would have lost the majority with the 2 deaths they've had in the last 2 months. This isn't some huge mandate. The American people are split, and we need to act like it in the way we design government.
I mean, I guess my biggest, I'm just repeating, frankly, what we've all been saying here. The biggest concern for me is that, this Trump wants to be king. And right now, there are, in theory, 3 co-equal branches of government. That's what our founding fathers wanted, and it makes sense. So there are checks and balances. And you see this administration going after law firms that have defended people against the administration or against Musk. You see, as Rohit just said, you see Republicans standing firm and we can't vote, we're not allowed to vote. Well, wait a minute. You were elected by us. We tell you who, we think is best. In theory, that's the way it should be. It should not be where a king gets to rule all 3 branches of government such that there really is only one branch.
I'll just make one quick comment, which is that do some analysis. I actually would be interested in learning it. I think we have roughly 1% of our population in civilian government. If that is high, we should think about what are ways to streamline that. I'm very open to that. What I think I take issue with is purposely getting rid of the people that are doing critical functions. And again, Shalanda, trust me, made sure that we were counting pennies everywhere. And there's more work to do there. So I am open to that, but I also want to react to the kind of unelected part. The truth is that agency heads, we are the ones who make decisions. We are chosen through the political process. We are accountable and, as shown for some of us, removable. So we try and create those accountabilities. And I agree, there shouldn't be people who get to veto the process. But we also want to make sure that the way to do that is for Congress to pass laws and for Congress to make those decisions. And I haven't seen them do too much of that.
Just as a Marine Corps veteran, thank you for everything that you've done for the VA, sir.
Yes.
Sure. Hi there. My name is Nathan Ostabil, and I'm a PhD student at the Public Policy School. I'm also a DC native and interned at Department of Education until January. I was wondering what advice you would give to people who were considering working for the federal government for years and now feel like it might not be an option on the table, just seeing the chaos, seeing Congress, in many cases, not pushing back and feeling like there almost certainly will be hiring freezes for the next few years.
State and local governments is one area, but I would also just say it all depends on where what you're interested in. But there's plenty of community-based organizations, advocacy groups across the country. So, if you're thinking of government, there's the federal government. You can shift over to, states or other organizations that actually provide services just at a different level.
Thank you.
Be what I would recommend at this point, because you're right, there is a hiring freeze now. Every agency had to put in a reduction in force plan, so the likelihood, unfortunately, of getting in really bright, talented people, our future, is slim to none, at least in the immediate future.
I'll remind you, congressional offices still get to hire. They are not under the hiring freeze. So those jobs are always hard to figure out and how to find, but that footprint hasn't changed the way the executive branch has changed.
Thank you to everyone.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Maria. I'm a graduate student at the Harris School of Public Policy. I wanted to ask because I heard two different things. So the dismantling of the organizations due to cuts to bypass Congress, and also the politicization of leadership. So I just wanted to ask particularly about the protection agency. If you think there is a way in which the agency could still be efficient, even if leadership is politicized, should the executive have, I don't know, kind of cooperative leadership across different organizations or institutions, especially because you mentioned that some of these leadership positions do not have removal protection. So say we have a benevolent leader, which we can, in this case, agree Trump is not, and he's not seeking efficiency in these organizations, but could these organizations function with politicized leadership? I just wanted to see if we can disentangle those two things of the dismantlement of the institutions and the politicization of the leadership.
I think it's a little bit of question about law enforcement. So it is true that there's very few statutes that say the president or something cannot be involved. I don't think that's ever written. It's mostly been a norm. I never, as a federal trade commissioner or as CFPB director, got a call saying, go investigate this person or this company. That was just something that wasn't really done. At the same time, of course, it is important for political leadership to express concerns about abuse, about people being cheated, about people being subjected to criminal, wrongdoing. But I think I just get a little bit, we have to figure out as part of this, where is the line? And for a long time, we've had a norm where there was not interference with law enforcement in terms of their case selection. And I think that's really where there needs to be more discussion about when should someone be able to reach in and say, drop this case. I think the appropriate place is through the official pardon process, where the president issues a pardon and it is made public and they're held accountable, but that there is some degree of independence around which companies or individuals are prosecuted.
And for the NLRB, what I will say is that, as I said at the very beginning, I've been with the agency almost 30 years, and it has been somewhat independent, but there have been plenty of appointees that are appointed by a Republican president who, at least in my mind, have elevated corporate interests above workers' rights. That's why I started the way I started, because I feel, and as general counsel, I think we did an excellent job of ensuring that we were fully effectuating our congressional mandate to protect workers' rights. Workers have rights under the statute, not corporations, not unions, workers. And so, but it's happened for decades where you'll get some folks that are nominated and confirmed that elevate corporate interests above workers' rights, don't take as many cases to the board or want to change precedent such that it squelches workers' rights in some form or fashion. But it doesn't mean the agency doesn't function, and it doesn't mean that the law enforcement activities still don't happen. In fact, the vast majority of the work is done in the regional offices. We have almost 50 of them. I say we, I'll always say we, around the country, and they do the bulk of the work without any involvement from headquarters, right? They investigate the cases, they do all of the litigation, and they settle 95%, around 95% of all cases that are found to have merit without even litigating. So the bread and butter and the core law enforcement activities will remain, no matter what. I mean, unless there's absolutely zero independence, or they gut the agency and there's nobody to investigate or litigate, or and that would be very problematic. But in terms of being able to operate despite some sort of partisan thinking, that has happened and I think will continue to happen.
And there seems to be an impression given that by cutting staff, you're going to make the department more efficient. Certainly, I know VA pretty well. Mental health and veteran suicide is a national tragedy. Every day, every single day, 17 or 18 veterans die by suicide. VA does a lot of work to help veterans. They have so many different programs. They have something called the Veterans Crisis Line, which is a resource for veterans in need. One of the worst days I had in the office is first thing in the morning, I got an email from a veteran who said, my buddy was in crisis all weekend. He called the Veterans Crisis Line. He didn't get the help he needed. He shot himself. I don't know who to turn to. So we immediately started looking at it. The Veterans Crisis Line wasn't working well. Again, this is making government more effective and more efficient. It's much better today than it was several years ago. But again, it goes to the point where if you're just going to start cutting people who rely on the departments, who rely on the service of the department, aren't going to have everything that they need. Certainly, I know from VA, they've already cut 2,400 people. There's stories out there about the mental health services at VA are in chaos right now. They've already announced that they're going to be cutting 80,000 more positions. Most of those will have to come on the healthcare side. The question about should I join the government, why would anybody want to join VA now if you know there's cuts of 80,000 coming? It's got to be just really, really difficult and challenging. So I don't think any of us are saying that the right number, that the federal government currently has the right number of people. I think our point is if you're going to be cutting, you got to do a deep analysis and know what it is and what the consequences are. And I don't think any of us are seeing that happening right now.
And I would say that I don't think at the NLRB that anybody should be cut. And in fact, I have been pushing to get more funding so that we can hire more people because of the need. I
hope you take this away. There needs to be a lot of analysis, but this will never work unless Congress is fully engaged. Okay, I've worked in the House of Representatives and I've worked for a president. The people closest to the people are people who have to get elected every 2 years and who represent a smaller amount of people, 600,000 or more. And when they are not putting their stamp of approval by passing laws to deal with these things, it's not going to be done right. And it's not right. And that is counter to our Constitution. So I hope you all take that back with you. It's not that things don't have to get done. One person can't do it and one branch can't do it. That's not how our system was set up.
Well, thank you.
Hi, my name is Konstantinos. I'm a PhD student in the CS department. I have two pieces. So one is, I've heard this saying, and I would like to hear your comments on it, that regulations are written in blood. We heard stories about like crisis in the VA. The NLRA was passed after like major civil disobedience. Dodd-Frank was passed after a horrific financial crisis. So I would like to hear your comment on that. And secondly, we're seeing this, which ties into the previous question of like, we're seeing this gutting of government agencies. And is there a difference between a law not existing and a law not being implemented? Like, we have the NLRA, but if there is no one to process a complaint, is there a difference with the NLRA just not being there?
You want to?
I think that's maybe a little bit of the constitutional issues that Shalanda raised, which is that I think there is a view that the executive branch just gets to say which laws don't exist anymore. And the way that would usually be done is repealing a law with the consent of the governed through Congress. And my sense is that this will create quite a bit of a clash over time. I think my personal view is the inspectors general will probably maybe get moved to be an agency of Congress, rather than, which I don't think is the best idea, but it may end up happening. And I think you will start seeing a lot of questions about what is, if Congress can just pass a law, like after some of these major crises, can someone just repeal the law without Congress functionally? And I think we're seeing that question being litigated.
And we're seeing it happen. The Empowerment and Control Act, which came after another crisis in this country with Nixon. I think Judge Scalia said Nixon was the impounder in chief, and we stopped him. And that was after Congress passed a law in 1974 giving itself more firepower. They created a Congressional Budget Office to counter the Office of Management and Budget, so they can have their own analysis. They said, hey, presidents, you can't impound. The Constitution gave us appropriations and spending clause, but we'll give you two ways to do it. We'll give you a process into which you can submit to us a list, and we will act on it or not. And this administration says they don't believe that act is constitutional. So we're seeing just blanket statements that we will not follow these laws because our analysis tells us they're unconstitutional.
Well, I mean, I just go to where is the outrage? Where is the outrage in Congress in that their powers are being removed from them? And where is our outrage in allowing our elected officials to sit on their hands and do nothing and let their power be taken away from them? I mean, that's the question I pose to everybody. That's, you know, I mean, I have hope, but the hope comes with like the outrage of this is unacceptable. We are a country of the people, by the people, for the people. Like, we need to be out there.
We'll try to be efficient and get everyone in line.
Okay. My name's Elizabeth. I'm a fourth year in the college from just outside of Washington, D.C. And I think my question, you began to hint at talking through it, but where do we go from here? Like, if the courts legitimate these presidential actions, it seems like the path is then obvious, but if they don't, do you see Congress or agencies or the president taking other steps to try to undermine the way that agencies and Congress work in perhaps ways that the courts might deem constitutional?
I think it may get solved at the ballot box.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, who knows where we're going to end up? I don't think it's going to get any better. I think we're going to look back at this time and say, boy, I wish we were back in, March, when, 6 months from now. I mean, I think we're really headed down a pretty scary path. And I agree. I think it's got to be in the ballot box. I've talked to a number of members up on the Hill and say, is there a tipping point? Are there private conversations going on? And to a person, they say there are conversations going on, but unless they see it from the voters, either at town halls or at the ballot box, they don't think anything's going to change at this point. So I think we're months, if not longer, watching this really come out and see where we're going to end up.
And just to speak on that, I mean, now they won't do town halls, right? And they're telling people, don't call our offices. I mean, so, well, then you don't represent us, and you're not listening to us, then you're not amplifying our voices, so we have to do it ourselves, whether through the ballot box or other mechanisms.
But you're already seeing, Social Security having real issues here where people can't get through on the phones. Things like that really impact people's lives. I think that's what's going to get people going. When they just hear theoretically about, well, the checks and balances aren't working, that's not real to people. That doesn't mean anything. But if they're not getting their Social Security check, if they're not able to get Medicaid or Medicare, things like that they expect, then I think that will get people moving.
And I'm supposed to wrap up, but can you quickly give your
Yeah,
question?
my name is Eric Mao. I run the group called the Geopolitical Forum. And very interesting conversation. I heard the word outrage. I heard a lot of things you said. Jennifer, you called Trump wanting to be a king and call for outrage of the people. So my question for you and the panel is, especially the former IG, you mentioned the ballot box, that's a good inspiration. Why outrage right now? This is a complex issue. It's a big government, big country. Why don't we let it run its course and see what the outcome is? That's what the election cycles are about, right? We have elections 2 years, another one 4 years. Let the people decide, because what we hear today, the situation, is the result of the previous election. So for you to call Trump like wanting to be a king, you're kind of a little bit
He called himself that, actually.
Yeah,
but,
you kind of be offensive to the people who voted for him, let alone they're like more than like a majority of the country. So what's wrong with let the thing run its course? Because it's just very new now, it's still very fresh, and we will see the outcome for in 1 year, 2 years, and let the voters decide again.
I guess if we lived in a country where people played dead and were silent about government action, I've served in government every place. I get a lot of feedback, criticism. I think this is like part of democratic systems, and I strongly oppose any idea that we should censor ourselves.
Yeah, and I was going to say, elections have consequence. The president won. The president can appoint people. He can fire people within the rules. The reason we're bringing the lawsuit as inspectors general, he has the right to fire us, but he's got to do it the right way. He didn't do it the right way pursuant to what the law is. And I think that's what we're saying. We're not saying he can't do what he wants to do. He's just got to follow the rules. There's civil service protections out there for federal workers. A lot of those have just been essentially ignored. And you just go across the various things that are being done. They're not following the law. That's where it's in the courts right now in so many instances. And we'll see where that ends up, because we haven't really talked about it. But if they don't follow what the courts are saying, then we have another huge constitutional crisis. And we may be heading that way. We don't know. They say they're going to follow the court's rules, but there's a lot of rulings that are yet to come.
I want to thank our guests for coming. I appreciate everything you said today. I will say this, and I'll end with this. I went to the archives at NARA, at our records administration, and you should see what the oath. We take an oath of office. All of us did when we took our jobs, and it's to the Constitution. Back then, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, who signs Alex, by the way, in his oath, which was a surprise to me, they talked a lot about King George, and that they would not live under the rule of a king. And our entire system was meant for the Tea Party to show up. I was in Congress with Tea Party flags outside, letting it be known they did not believe we should pass the Affordable Care Act. And they had every right to do that. People in this country have every right to speak up at every moment of our political process. And I've visited countries we thought had chosen the democratic way. And it's moments like these when people don't stand up that you look around and ask, what the hell happened? So all of you stay engaged. It doesn't matter what side you're on, stay engaged. That's the system we live in, and that's why I love this country. So thank you so much.